Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Aquarium of the Pacific's Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. And I am being joined in the studio today by my friends. I have Courtney, who is going to be changing everything that you see on the screen behind you, and I also have our friend Jayla, who's in here in the studio helping out and watching our program with us today as well. So if you would like to participate along with us today, you are welcome to text us, and we can respond to those text messages by using that number that you see on your screen, 562-286-1838. And you can text any questions, observations, responses to questions I might ask, and they will be able to relay those messages back to me so we can share them and discover and learn together along today. However, if you're watching this at a later time, today is July 1st, and if it is not July 1st at 9 o'clock Pacific time when you are watching this, you are welcome to text or to email us any questions you might have at the email address that you see on the screen at live@lbaop.org. And we may not get back to you right away, but one of our educators will get a chance to respond to that so that you are still able to ask your questions and get some answers. Okay, so today let's go ahead and dive right into it. We are going to be talking about the deep sea and bioluminescence. So two very fascinating topics that, let's be honest, we honestly don't know that much about. We're learning more and more. So it's a very exciting area of marine biology and marine science to be looking at the aspects of the deep sea and bioluminescence. So I kind of want to throw it out there. If we have anyone watching right now, if you're wondering what is the deep sea, what is it like, or what kinds of ideas might come to your mind as far as what animals might live there or what it must be like, imagine living in the deepest part of the ocean. How deep do you think that is? And what would those conditions be like? So I want you to just kind of imagine that for a little bit. Imagine if you would go to the deepest part of the ocean. First of all, how would you get there? And how would you be able to explore? What types of tools do you think that we use to learn more about the deep sea? So if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to go ahead and contact us again at that number on the screen, 562-286-1838. So what is the deep sea like? How do we get there? How do we learn about it? What kind of tools do we use? And of course, you can throw in animals that you might know that live in the deep sea as well. So think about that. I'm actually going to step off the screen for a moment so you can see this is actually one of our largest, or this is our largest exhibit here at the aquarium. It's our tropical reef habitat. And it is not exactly a deep sea habitat. It gets a lot more sunlight than the deep sea, but it's still beautiful to look at. So I'll give you that while you're thinking. As you're thinking about what types of bioluminescent, or I'm sorry, kind of gave one thing away. What types of animals are in the deep sea? What are the conditions like? How do we discover more about it? What tools do we use? All right, and I understand we have a third grade class that's watching us today. So hello to all of you. And if you have any thoughts or questions that you would like your teachers to enter in, that would be great. We'd love to hear from you. So the deep sea, what is it like? How might it be different than what you're seeing in front of you here on this live feed? All right, sorry about that. My microphone, I was having some issues with it turning off on me. And anyway, let's go ahead and explore. Let's imagine. So you're going down to the deep sea. Well, as you go deeper and you're getting farther from the surface of the ocean, what's going to happen to the amount of light around you? Well, obviously, it's going to start to fade. It's going to disappear because light doesn't travel as well through water as it does through air. And so there's some things that change. Not only does it get darker, but the amount of colors that we can see changes too, because all the light that's coming from the sun is coming, we have the full spectrum. the light that we see is made up of several different wavelengths. And think about a rainbow and a spectrum, or a prism that would separate those into different colors, those different wavelengths. You would see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Well, our eye sees them all bunched together as white light, but then they start to separate. And so as you go deeper into the ocean also kind of filters out those colors that are traveling down deeper. And so the first wavelength, that red on the top of the rainbow, is going to be the first one that kind of fades away because it has a wavelength that is not as strong. It's a long wavelength. It doesn't travel as far through the water. And so that means that anything in the water that normally our eyes would perceive as red, guess what happens? If it goes deeper and that red wavelength can't get to it, that animal is not going to appear red anymore. It will be void of color. It might look kind of black. So red doesn't exist very much below the very surface of the ocean. You won't even see that color unless you had a flashlight and you were shining on it. And also, it's Mrs. Rodolphin's class that I wanted to say hello to. So thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions, let us know. Anything that you want to share during our program. But thank you for being with us today. And so as you go deeper, those different colors will start to fade away, and you won't be able to see as many of those things that you can see at the surface. So how do they deal with that? As you go deeper, okay, our colors are changing. We're seeing less bright colors. It's getting darker. And now if we go down to the very, very bottom of the ocean, we might see something that looks like this. It doesn't look very colorful at all, really, does it? But this might be what the bottom of the ocean could look like. Oftentimes we don't think about how different the bottom of the ocean can look compared to the surface. We see the surface and we think, oh, it's all flat. It's just a bunch of waves. But those waves are covering over mountain ranges. They're covering over deep sea trenches. You might see formations that are coming up from the bottom. You might even see other things that are coming up from the bottom, maybe like gases and really, really hot water from things called smokers or deep sea vents. So we have all sorts of things underneath the bottom of the ocean that we don't normally think about or see much of when we're thinking about animals at the surface or when we go swimming in the water ourselves. So what other things other than the color disappearing? If the color is disappearing, there's some other things that we might want to use or that organisms that live in the deep sea might want to be using to help them survive. Can you think of any way that there would be color at the bottom of the ocean if the sunlight isn't able to reach it? I mean, think about that. In fact, the sunlight is really important. If the sunlight can't get through to the animals that live at the plants, the organisms that are at the surface of the water, well, we're going to have some problems because it's really important that those green plants or algae in the water can also get energy from the sun so that they can produce food and they can produce oxygen. So it goes right into the water that we can all benefit from, all the animals in the ocean, and even we benefit from it. A lot of the oxygen we breathe is coming from the ocean, believe it or not. A question came in. Do big sharks live in the deep sea? Okay, good question. Because some of you may have heard about the fact that there used to be some really big sharks out there called Megalodon. In fact, I might even have a tooth from one of those I can show you. This is a model. This is not a real one. But this is a tooth of a Megalodon. So it's a pretty big tooth here. But this shark is extinct. So I know you might have some fanciful ideas about, what might be lurking in the deep, dark parts of the ocean. No megalodons, but we do know that they have existed because we found their teeth before. However, there are sharks that live in the deepest part of the sea. I don't know the biggest size. The ones that I know of, let's see, they found bonnet head sharks. Do you know what a bonnet head shark is? It looks kind of like a hammerhead shark. It is a type of hammerhead shark. But the bonnet head shark is one of the smaller ones. So they're maybe about 5 feet or so in length. They've been found around these deep sea vents at the bottom of the ocean. We've seen, I don't know how deep Greenland sharks go or what their actual length is, but Greenland sharks are also deep sea sharks. So, here's a bonnet head shark. This is actually one from our very own gallery. So that exhibit that you were just looking at, the tropical reef habitat, we have some bonnet head sharks in there. So that's what they look like. Very cool looking sharks, and they have that very strange shaped head, but they are also pretty small. But I don't know of any really large sharks that live in the deep sea. The Greenland shark is the only one I can think of that is that's the deepest shark that I know of. And maybe we could even look up how deep, maybe someone out there can look up how deep the Greenland shark goes or how long it is, because I honestly don't know. So it's a good question. But if you're thinking about like Megalodon size, I would say it'd be very unlikely since those are all extinct. I don't know of any sharks that compare in size to that. The whale shark is, of course, our largest shark, and it is not considered a deep sea shark. They like to hang out in areas where there can be lots of plankton to feed on. So even though they're massive sharks, their teeth are very different. In fact, let me show you. We have a model right here of a whale shark jaw. And their teeth, if I was to flip this around, are right down here. And you can barely even see them. Let's see, if I even bring this closer to the screen, can you see it looks kind of like these little ridges that are right there. And these ridges, that's all they need because they feed on plankton rather than the larger fish or animals that an animal like the Megalodon would have fed on. So, okay, I have, Courtney's giving me some information here. 7,200 feet deep is how deep the Greenland shark goes. So that's pretty deep. But now let's think about how deep the actual ocean is. The deepest part of the ocean, do you know where it is? Do you know what ocean it's in? Because we have different oceans. They're all connected, so it's basically one big ocean. But what is the deepest part of it? Does anyone know what the biggest ocean is in the world? Well, it's right off our coast. It's right off our coast here in the Pacific Ocean. Well, the deepest part is not right off our coast, but the ocean right off our coast is the Pacific Ocean. And the deepest part is the Mariana Trench. And the Mariana Trench is 35,876 feet deep. And that's actually, it might even be deeper in some little regions. But that is really deep. And just to give you an idea, that would be deep enough that you could take Mount Everest, so our tallest mountain on the planet, and actually put it down into the Mariana Trench, and it would be deep enough that Mount Everest would still be covered over the top with water. So it's very, very deep, very, very dark down there. And in fact, what we know about the ocean, the deepest parts of the ocean, are coming from things like this. What do you think you're looking at right here? What is this a picture of? Things I'm noticing, a lot of darkness around the outside. So why is it so dark and light here? Obviously, it looks like there's a light source coming from this thing. And then there's also this line that looks like it might be connecting it to something else. Well, this is how scientists have been able to explore the deepest part of the ocean where people normally wouldn't be able to go, wouldn't be able to just like swim down because of other elements that make things very difficult for them. And let me also see, we've got another thing. Can we get light at the bottom of the ocean from lava? Is that what it says? Oh, can we get light at the bottom of the ocean from lava? I like what you're thinking because we do know that as lava comes down a mountain, you see that glowing red color. So could there be lava that's kind of glowing at the bottom of the ocean? Oh, well, that's a good question. In fact, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen any images of glowing areas in the bottom of the ocean. Have you guys seen anything like that? I might say it's possible. So there might be a way that there could be something coming from the earth that you would see in the deepest part of the ocean, because where these vents are very, very, very hot because they're releasing chemicals into the water, and these chemical reactions actually can create also these chimneys. You might notice these chimneys here that are a result of different chemicals coming from the core of the earth, coming on up and making these chemical deposits create these chimneys where these vents are coming out. So you might be able to see a little bit of smoke here. I honestly, that's a really good question. You kind of have me stumped right now because I feel like in my mind I've seen pictures like that, but certainly not recently have I seen any sort of light like lava at the bottom of the ocean? So that's a really good question. You kind of have me stumped, and I'll have to look into this a little bit. It would be a really great area to explore if you want to do a little bit of research on your own too. And then you can email us and let us know what you find, and hopefully they'll pass it on to me. But I'll have to look that up on my own too. But again, we do have these different chimneys and vents and what we call smokers that are down at the bottom of the ocean. So a source of light, though, thinking about what other things could be creating light. Well, do animals create light? Can you think of any animals that create light? And what do we call it when animals are creating their own light? And you might think, well, I don't go down to the ocean on a regular basis. I certainly don't look at the deep sea. So how would I know what animals create light? Well, there's a lot of animals that create light that don't even live in the ocean. Maybe you've seen some if you've ever caught fireflies before, or if you've ever seen them flying around. Those are animals that are creating their own light. And when an animal is able to create their own light, it has a special name called bioluminescence. So bioluminescence is a chemical reaction that happens inside a living organism's body. So it produces light, and it's what we call cold light, because many times when you turn on a light, you're using electricity, it also creates heat. Heat is a byproduct of it. But with these animals, it doesn't really create heat. It's a cold light that they're able to use in various ways. Why do you think an animal would want to light up? What would be the purpose of lighting up? Can you think of any reasons? And think about the ocean and the bottom of the ocean. Right here we have a picture of some corals that are lighting up. So this right here is a deep sea coral. Right here, this is with what it looks like in regular lighting, but then this is what it looks like when they're bioluminescent. So when they're actually creating their own light. Well, maybe we should look at how this happens. What is bioluminescence? How does it happen? Well, bioluminescence, as I said, is a chemical reaction. And here's actually a great example of an animal that can bioluminesce. It's called an ostracod, or a deep sea firefly. And the ostracods, these deep sea fireflies, have this sort of hard layer around the outside of their body. It's a type of plankton that's really, really super tiny. And if we were to kind of mash it up, if this animal was no longer alive and you found a dead ostracod sitting around, you could actually mash it up to break open so you can get into where its body parts are. And it would look like this. In a little dish, all those little tiny specks in there are deep sea ostracods. But look at what happens when we turn off the lights and we add some water with a pipette. Do you see that? So what you're looking at right here is some water that we added to that empty little bowl. And then here's the pipette. You can kind of see it's being used. And they're kind of spinning it around. So this is the bioluminescence, which is being stored inside the body of the ostracod. Even if the animal isn't alive anymore, they still have something called Luciferin Protein and luciferase, which is an enzyme. And in the presence of water and the oxygen from that, it creates light. And so that's what many animals in the deep sea are able to do. Some scientists think that maybe like 78, 80%, maybe even more of that of animals have that in the deep sea can bioluminesce, which is pretty spectacular. So what is it about bioluminescence? Why would they do this in the deep sea? Just to be fancy and show off like an electric light parade? Why is it? Well, it could be that they want attention. And who would they want attention of? Well, maybe you are trying to impress a mate. It can be one of the ways that they attract mates over is by using their bioluminescence to help them find other organisms in the dark. Think about how hard it would be to find somebody, find your friend even, without any lights if it was completely dark around you. So being able to have like a code that you could give them, like a flashlight, is a great way to communicate in the darkness. So they could communicate, they could be showy, maybe find or attract a mate. But what are some other ways that they could use it? Well, if you've seen Finding Nemo, you probably remember there was a light that seemed to attract fish over to it, but then they got a little bit closer and they realized maybe that's not what they wanted to go to because it was a light of an anglerfish. Anglerfish are an example of a fish that uses bioluminescence on a lure at the end of its head, so just like this. And then it attracts other fish over to it, thinking that this is something to eat. They're like, oh, is that food, or what is that? I want to go check it out. And then as they get closer, they open that big old mouth of theirs. You'll see their mouth is kind of upward facing, and they can grab that fish and bring it down and swallow it. So they can use it to attract prey. They can also use it to, if, say, they're being eaten by something. So say there's an animal that's noticing, I'm about to be eaten by this thing. Well, you know what? I am in danger. I want something else to come and save me from this animal right here. And so they might create their own bioluminescence as like a burglar alarm to say, hey, there's something here. There's something right here in the dark. So is there anyone else out there who's hungry that wants to come and get this thing? Let's do that. So you're kind of inviting other creatures to come and hopefully rescue you by them eating this animal. And Dr. Edie Witters is one who helped notice that and discover that they would do this with these bioluminescent sea jellies. And so it's one of the ways that they attracted over a giant squid. I'm sure you've heard about giant squid before. They are a deep sea animal, and we don't know very much about them. And it wasn't until 2012 that we were able to see one alive for the first time. And this was done by using this type of jelly. So what you're seeing here is a little snapshot of a jelly that can bioluminesce, and it can spread out its light all over its body, and it can be this beautiful flashing effect. So here we just have one little image, but the whole entire inside, this is what we call the bell of the jelly, this inside round part, they can also bioluminesce as well. And by sending out this alarm like, hey, something's out there, something's eating me, something big, please come on over and grab it, we learned that that is one of the ways that animals using bioluminescence can protect themselves. So they use it for defense or for asking for a call for help. They can use it to find a mate. They can use it to find their food. Also, one thing that's really unusual is that there is a fish in the ocean. Remember how we said that red light doesn't travel very far? And you'll notice when we've shown you the pictures of bioluminescence so far, they're mostly blue, because blue and like the purple colors have the smallest wavelength. They are the strongest, and they can travel the farthest in the ocean. So a lot of animals even lose their ability to sense red light. They can't even see it because they're like, there's no need for red light down here because no light ever gets down here. If any light gets through, it's going to be like the blue, red, or blue and purple sort of color. So what they do is they are kind of in tune to looking for this blue light. So that's why it's so common in the ocean that in bioluminescence, most of these colors we're seeing are blues. However, there is a fish that does have the ability to still see red light. And one of the cool things is that they can produce a red light themselves. And because so many other animals in the deep sea can't see it, what this fish can do is use it like a flashlight. And it can look around and say, okay, where's my food? Where's my food? Where's my food? And they can shine a red light so that another animal who can't see red is standing right there in the spotlight or swimming in the spotlight. And they don't even know that they are being illuminated by an animal about to eat them. So it's pretty amazing what these animals in the deep, dark ocean can do and how they use their bioluminescence in different ways. So another way that they can use bioluminescence is to surprise or to confuse a predator. And this can be distracting by an animal. Say you're a small little shrimp and you're about to be eaten by something. And you have this ability, like this shrimp right here, to spray out some bioluminescent sort of a puff, just like this, into the ocean. Well, an animal that's trying to target you might be very distracted by this puff. So they're like, wait a minute, what happened? Kind of like if a big blast of light just happened as you were in the middle of doing something. It might stop you for a second saying, what was that? What happened? And then it gives that little animal just a small chance to get away, a quick chance to, find some safety while the predator who wasn't expecting it is startled. And that's also something that you might be able to see if you're ever at the ocean at night at just the right time of year. It's not a very predictable time. Scientists haven't exactly predicted when these things will happen. But if you're ever around the ocean and you notice that there's a red tide, if it looks as if the water around you is kind of an orangish, reddish, brownish color, much more than usual, there's a good chance you might be looking at a red tide. And a red tide is made up of all these little tiny organisms, a type of plankton called phytoplankton. Or I'm sorry, not phytoplankton, called dinoflagellates. And these dinoflagellates are able to, if you watch this water here, look at the waves. Tell me if you notice anything unusual about the color of these waves as they're crashing. Do you notice that blue color? Yeah, sometimes they look like regular kind of waves in the darkness, but other times they have that blue sort of look to them. So that is due to the presence of all these tiny dinoflagellates in the water, that what they do is they spend their daytime up at the surface getting all this energy and light from the sun, but at night, if they are disturbed by like moving water, or if you were to put your hand through the water or an oar from a boat, you would actually be kind of stirring it up, and they'd all be like, oh, something is stirring us up. Let's go ahead and distract it and create our bioluminescence. And so sometimes it looks like the ocean waves are glowing. In fact, I don't know if we have another picture. There was a friend of mine who used to work at the aquarium who was going out on a boat during one of these times that we had these glowing waves. All these dinoflagellates were in the water. And on her boat, she could actually see all of this. Is from Kira Mathis. She actually got a great picture of how, as the boat was going through the water, it was disturbing the waves and causing all these dinoflagellates in the water to release their bioluminescence. And I think it's pretty neat to be able to see that. That's right here in Long Beach, just a few years back. So probably around, I think it was in 2020 actually, is when that was happening. But anyway, we've looked at how animals use their bioluminescence. What types of animals do? We saw that it can be shrimp, it can be sea jellies, little tiny plankton in the water, actually a big variety of animals can bioluminesce. Even some sharks have the ability, maybe not so much to bioluminesce, but something called fluoresce. So fluorescence is when an animal appears a different color, a bright color, beautiful color, when a certain type of light is shown upon them. So some animals might have a green appearance. We have some animals like our swell sharks, which can be found right here in Southern California. Very small sharks, very cute. Only get about maximum 4 feet, if that. Maybe 3.5 feet is better. But they can also kind of have this green glowing appearance to them. There are certain jellies, like a flower hat jelly, that can have these beautiful colors come from them. Here we have one. Isn't this cool? This is a flower hat sea jelly. You can see how they appear to be this glowing blue and greenish color. So this is a fluorescent animal. So they're not actually producing their own light, but when they absorb the colors of other wavelengths, they can give back a very different glowing appearance. So we see lots of animals in the ocean that can light up, that can bioluminesce, that can fluoresce. But then also, as we go deeper, we saw that light disappeared. We know that there are vents at the bottom of the ocean creating chemicals that are creating these statues and chimneys, maybe not statues, but chimneys, where other organisms can be found living. Because if you don't have sunlight, that means it's going to be a little bit colder. You don't have the warmth of the sun that's heating up the ocean. So as you go deeper, it's going to get colder. So you might wonder, how can anything survive when it's really, really cold water? How do they stay warm? Well, many animals have found that they can live near these deep sea vents where there is a lot of extra heat. It can be very, very hot there, in the hundreds of temperatures. I don't remember exactly what the highest temperature is there, but it can get very, very hot. And so some animals live in those areas, and that's where they discovered some bonnet head sharks were actually able, around these vents, to survive. Even though we saw them up in our tropical habitat, some can be found in the deep sea as well. So there can be organisms living on the sea floor where it's warmer, and also using the chemicals. And when I say using the chemicals, I mean just like I was talking about breathing and how we get a lot of oxygen from the ocean, and we're breathing it in the air, but it's coming from plants that are creating this oxygen for us through photosynthesis. Now, the process of photosynthesis, where organisms get energy from the sun and create their own food, and also the byproduct of oxygen, Well, that can't happen if there's no sunlight getting to these organisms at the bottom of the ocean. They instead take advantage of those chemicals coming from the vents, and they use something called chemosynthesis. So they're creating what they need to leave through chemicals in the ocean. So here you can kind of see what's going on inside in the core of the earth down here, coming on up, this heat that's coming up, and these black smokers that are being created, and the whole process of chemosynthesis. Now, if you really want to go into chemistry, you're welcome to take a screenshot of this and look it up and study it some more, but I'm not going to go into all that. But chemosynthesis keeps these animals living. Bioluminescence keeps these animals living, and their ability to capture prey, especially using that bioluminescence, keeps them living in the deep sea. There's a lot of pressure down there, which is why we can't just swim down there and discover it on our own, and which is why we are relying on ROVs, which are remotely operated underwater vehicles, and they can actually look at these different parts of the ocean and collect samples from it, and we can learn about it even when we are up on the surface on a boat controlling it with a joystick, kind of like a video game. So if you're really into video games and you'd love to explore the ocean, this might be just the area for you to go into, as we are still exploring and learning so much more about the ocean using special technology. This would be like the control center that you would be at, and what you would use to help control these ROVs, these remotely operated vehicles, in the water. So if this looks appealing to you, I encourage you to consider going into marine science and using technology there, because we need all sorts of people, all sorts of backgrounds, not just marine biology, but those who are interested in other areas of science to help us learn and explore the ocean. There is so much more to be explored out there. And I would just like to thank you all for joining us today for our Aquarium Online Academy. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the ocean or the deep sea. And thank you again so much for our third grade class that was joining us today. And feel free to type in any questions that you have into, you can use our email again that's on the screen at live@lbaop.org. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Thank you, everyone. Bye.